I've worked at half a dozen tech startups in my career. And while I'm at a larger company, a little bit more established, a little bit smoother sailing, I've come to the conclusion that everyone got a tech startup at least once in their career. And in this video, I'm going to state my case as to why. And hopefully by the end of it, you agree with me. And in the case that you don't, that's fine. You know, you don't have to listen to me. I'm just a voice on the internet, so like take it all with a grain of salt, right? All of my opinions, so, you know, sue me. So obviously there are a lot of different types of startups. There are a lot of different approaches to this, but I'm going to be talking about a very specific idea of what a startup is, and that's going to fit 3 criteria. This is also the criteria, I think, that is the criteria you should look for when you're looking for your first tech startup, whether you're a junior engineer, a more mid-level, or arguably even senior. Here are the 3 criteria that you should have for every startup. 1 is a clear product market fit. You need to know who your user base is. I can't tell you how many startups I know that have an interesting idea, but absolutely no idea who's it going to be built for. And that is like walking around in a room in pure darkness without the hopes of finding a light switch. It is just not going to work out all that well. So that leads into the next piece of criteria, which is capital. You need to have at least enough money for 2 years. I'd say that's the sweet spot. Anything that's less than that is going to feel like pure chaos, and it is. You will be always thinking about that number. At least 2 years gives you wiggle room and the ability to pivot the way you need to if things are changing, which they will. Also, if you have capital, it probably means the idea of your company has a product market fit and has a user base you know that you're going after. Okay, so now that we have those, the last one is going to be the employee count. I find that anywhere between 20 and 50 employees is going to be that sweet spot where you're going to be in early enough where you're going to like see how the entire company is built, but you're also not in so early that you are wearing every hat and not just a few. When it comes to engineering org, having at least 10 engineers, maybe 1 or 2 teams is going to be a really valuable experience, because then you're not just drowning with work and you're able to jump between teams, and it's manageable in understanding what everyone is doing, but it's not so chaotic that you are expected to do everything. Okay, that is the basis of what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about startups from here on out, it is about a company that fits that criteria. What are the benefits of working for these chaotic little companies that can either drive you completely mad or make you a lot of money? It's usually going to be the first, but there's this healthy sense of madness that comes with each one of these companies. One of the biggest benefits is you're going to see how a company works. I know that not everyone cares to start their own company, but it's valuable to know what it looks like and how a company operates. If you go into a big company, let's say you are going to be probably put in one team working on one little side piece of a project, and you're just a cog in the machine, and that's fine. There's a time and place for that. You're limited in understanding how the company functions. You are going to be limited in understanding the larger whole, and that is a downside. Like if you go into a smaller company, you're going to understand the leadership decisions a little bit more. You're going to understand where capital is actually allocated, what it looks like to work within those constraints, and you know, for better or worse, you're just going to have more insight into what's actually going on. In businesses, there's always going to be hard limitations, and in startups especially, you're going to have a fixed amount of capital, a fixed amount of resources, and a fixed amount of time for the most part, at least in the current model of how startups are going, which a lot of these companies, there's a whole argument to be made that that is changing as well. But you're going to have to understand and work within those limitations, which causes you to think differently and to break out of those norms and expectations you might have if you were at a larger company. It also exposes artificial constraints. And what I mean by this is if you go to larger companies, there is already a process, there is a culture, there is an organizational structure that you are going to be operating within. You are bound to that approach. And much as you want to change that, there's only so much you can do here and there. If you go to a startup, none of that exists. Almost all that process is gone. You do not have to follow Agile to a T. You don't have to clear things with product managers. How you structure Jira tickets doesn't matter. If you use Jira at all, hopefully you don't. All of those things, all that process, to be there at the beginning of when that is being created is going to be a huge benefit to you later on. You will understand what works, what doesn't. You get to see the decision made, and you get to see how it plays out. You don't get to do that at a large company. Very rarely. You're just not going to get that. You only get that at a startup. That is an awesome experience. So, okay, you don't care about starting a business, so why do you need to learn how a business business works? Well, it also makes you maybe a little bit wiser of what kind of company you want to go to next. You can ask the questions that are going to give you a sense of how the business is working, how people operate within it. You also have the ability to maybe have your ear to the ground if the company doesn't look like it's doing too well, or maybe it's time to switch to another team or find another job. But you're going to know all that experience from seeing firsthand how a business operates. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits even if you don't care to start your own business. And if you do want to start your own business, obviously you should go work at a tech startup. Now let's talk about more of the technical aspects that I think are beneficial. So you get to see the software lifecycle. There are going to be decisions made early on that sound great, right? You guys all agree that maybe this is the architectural decision we go on. And 2 years down the road, if you get that far, you're going to start seeing where things fall through the cracks. You're going to start seeing how things break down. And you're going to understand where those decisions made early on have their limitations. You get to see what works and what doesn't work, and you get to see it play out. I think there's a larger problem that when people bop around from company to company every 2 years, which I'm guilty of, you don't see your decisions come to fruition, or you don't see them become the dumpster fire that they inevitably will, because you're not around to see it. And those are things that you learn from. You need to learn what happens when you decide, I'm going to take this architecture and blow it out for 2 years and constantly build features on it and have an entire org operate on it. You might not be making those decisions, but you get to learn from also all those decisions, and you get to experience vicariously, if you will, through the architect's decisions. Those skills are going to be transferable no matter where you go. You should absolutely try to see something through to the end. Don't just leave when things get frustrating, because trust me, they will, but you need to see it through to the end so that you can learn from those experiences. The other piece is you're going to find your personal limitations. You're going to find your own weaknesses and where you could improve, what you should invest time in. Maybe you also find your passions. You find what really excites you in software. When I was working at companies, I first came in as a front-end engineer, which, I thought it was fine, but I was always interested in learning, where does all this data come from? Where does it all go? I don't know why that sounds like I was going to bust out into rhyme, but I promise you I am not. So I started learning more about Node.js, understand more about databases, spending more time with JavaScript, to learning Go, more architectural decisions, learn GraphQL. I did all these things at this company. It excited me to learn this whole other world of software. There's some flexibility that only exists within a tech startup. You get to explore all these different areas of software. You get to find what makes you passionate, and you also get to learn what you might just absolutely hate. It will expose what your limitations are, what you enjoy, what you don't, in a way that I think a larger company will just not give you. If you're lucky at a tech startup, you're going to have this hyper growth moment where you get to see what it's like to adopt a large number of users very quickly. And it's an incredibly exciting moment at any company to be a part of that. And I think it's valuable to then understand what it's like to have to make changes to your code base, to see those limitations and move quickly, do all the bug bashing, have the production outages, all of that. But it's on a smaller scale. It doesn't have all the process around it, and you are able to experience that in real time. You don't have anyone to come save you in that moment. And I think that is a great experience. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the people. People that are going to be working at startups are hired on potential and passion. They might not be the most expert person in the field, but they want to learn everything. They're excited about what they do, and they bring that to work with them every day. And that is infectious. It makes you care more. It makes you excited to be there. It just is a more dynamic approach and a very fun atmosphere. You can go and work at a company where you pick off a ticket, you do it, you rinse and repeat. And there's a time and place for that. But when you walk into a company and everyone's excited about what they're working on and they're really pushing for a goal, it's more fun. You're going to learn more. You're going to be more engaged. You're just going to get more out of it. These are also people that naturally are going to go off and do more with their careers than somebody who's just taking a ticket and moving on. That is worth at least working with once. It inspired me to be more passionate about software, and to the point where, it went from just being a job to a career I was excited about. There's something to be said about working in an environment like that. The last point I want to make is that there is a good chance that the startup is going to fail. And that, I would say, is a good thing. You are going to learn more from a failure of a company than you are from its success. Having that knowledge is going to be valuable no matter where you go, and one that I think will benefit anyone. Almost none of the startups that I worked at are still around today. There may be one or two. One. If you're thinking about working at a tech startup, I say go for it. It's a valuable experience no matter how it shakes out. If you have any questions about startups or working at them or whatever it may be, feel free to reach out. If you're still around, please do the whole like, comment, and subscribe thing that they tell you to do. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.